Hello there, this is Instructor Paul, and in this lecture, we're going to be covering the basics of Active Directory users and computers. Now, by basics, I just mean that we're going to be covering what administrators do 95% of the time. There's a handful of tasks that administrators complete every single day with Active Directory, and that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do. I'm going to get you up to speed on the day-to-day work that you'll be doing with Active Directory out in the IT field. Now, this video is geared towards beginners. So if you're looking for an IT job, or maybe you have an IT job, but you need to learn how to work with Active Directory, I'm going to be showing you how to get those skills so you can add them to your resume. Now, I know it can be really frustrating for those of you who are trying to get a job, maybe as a help desk administrator or just a beginner entry level sysadmin, and you don't have Active Directory experience. It's really hard to get experience with the tool if you can't get a job because you don't have the experience. It's like a catch-22. So I'm going to solve that problem for you right now by just giving you the down and dirty, this is what you need to know how to do. So we're going to be covering a handful of things. And if you'd like to follow along, there's a link below that will send you an ebook, and it'll show you how to set up this exact server lab that I have set up here. So if you click the link below, you're going to be taken to my website. You enter your name and your email address and click send me the ebook, and the ebook will be sent to you. And this is what the ebook actually looks like. So you can scroll down, we can see that you're setting up virtual machines. You're going to install Windows Server 2016. And then once you're done with that, you can install the Active Directory server role, and you're going to be able to follow along in this course. You'll be exactly where I am in this step. So go ahead and click that link if you're interested. And for those of you who just want to watch, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do when you're trying to open Active Directory is you need to make sure that you're logged into the correct server. So any domain controller is going to be the server that we're going to want to log into. Now you can also install the RSAT or Remote Server Administration toolset, and you can administrate Active Directory from your local, Windows 10 or Windows XP or Vista or Windows 7 workstation, but I'm going to be showing you from the domain controller. So if you can't get to the domain controller, just download RSAT, and you'll need administrative credentials, but you should already have that if you're going to be administrating Active Directory. So the way that you can tell is when you open Server Manager by clicking down here in the left-hand corner, you can click Server Manager, and usually in the computer name, if we click on the local server tab here, on the computer name, DC will be included in the computer name. I've never, in the 10 years I've been working in IT, I've never worked in a shop, and I've worked in several over these 10 years, that did not include DC in the name of a domain controller. The next way that you can tell it's a domain controller is over here on the left, you should see ADDS, which stands for Active Directory Domain Services. That's the server role that is required to be installed for this server to be a domain controller and to have Active Directory. So once you realize you're on the domain controller, you can click Tools in the top right-hand corner. And what we're going to look for is Active Directory Users and Computers. When someone tells you, hey, create a new user account or reset my password in Active Directory, they don't mean the administrative center. They don't mean domain trust or module or sites and services. They mean Active Directory users and computers. 98% of the time, they're talking about Active Directory users and computers. So we're going to go ahead and open that up. And it'll just take a second. And now it's open. So here's the Active Directory users and computers console, commonly referred to as Active Directory. So what I'm going to do here, I think I have advanced features on, so I'm going to uncheck that so it'll be a little bit easier for you guys to see what's going on. So first thing you're going to see is we have our domain on the left-hand side, and my domain is instructorpaul.com because that's my website, and I just want to let you know about that. So if we look down here, we have a couple of folders was what it looks like. We have a built-in computers, domain controllers, foreign security principles, Instructor Paul, and a managed service accounts and users container. Now you'll notice that some of these, you can see under the type, there's a built-in domain. These, if I double click this, these are all groups that are essential for your domain to operate. Okay. Under the computers container, you can see there's a description populated here by default. It says the default container for upgraded computer accounts. Really what it's saying, when you join a computer to your domain or you bring a new computer into your workplace, you join it to a domain, it's going to be dropped in here by default. And when you see, we have a couple desktops in here. So next under domain controllers, you can see IPDC01, which is the domain controller that I am currently logged into. Foreign security principles, this is going to be not really relevant for this particular course, but if you have a trust established between two sites, you'll have objects inside of here that represent, they're called proxy objects. So here we have Instructor Paul. Now this is an organizational unit, just like domain controllers. And you might be wondering, what's the difference between an organizational unit and container? Because they both look like folders and they both hold, objects, right? Well, the difference is that the main difference is that you can apply a group policy object to an organizational unit, and you cannot for a container. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to be creating organizational units when you want to create a new folder or you want to organize your domain, hence the name organizational unit. It's really tricky. So what I want to do is show you how to create first a new user account and then how to delete the user account. So what you can do is just right click anywhere here on the screen, or you right click on the desired location here. So if I just want to create it under the root domain, instructorpaul.com, I can just right click here and say new, and we can say user. Now it does matter where you create the user account, but we'll get into more of that later. So let's just go ahead and select new and we'll click user. So now we can type in the name, and I'm going to do Paul Hill. And I'm just using tab to get through these windows a little bit faster. You can type in an initial if you want. And then you need to come down here to user log on name. And I'm going to call mine first.last, so paul.hill. And we can see this user pre-2000s auto-populated. This will make your username compatible with older systems. Any Windows Server operating system that's older than 2000, it's generally not even used, but there's some character requirements that you can't have, a certain number of characters in older systems. So it makes sure it's compatible with that. But that's not anything we're going to be using. So we're just going to click next and not worry about that. So now we need to type in a password, and I'm going to do that right now. Now, 9 times out of 10, when you're creating new user accounts, you'll be typing in a temporary password or a password that you'll be handing to them. So if you have, John Smith and he comes in, he's a new hire, and, your manager says, I need you to create an account for John Smith. What you're going to do is you're going to create a password, and you might call it like password 1 or temporary password, all those horrible passwords that we use that are really easy to hack, which hopefully you have your own password that, isn't password 1 or, or James Bond or something like that. You want to come up with a password that is somewhat unique, and you're going to check this user must change password at next logon checkbox. And what that does is when the user attempts to log into the computer account, once they type in this temporary password, it'll pop up with another message saying, hey, you need to type in and create your own password so that you're not using this temporary password that the administrator provided you, which is what we're typing in here. Okay, so we're going to leave that checkbox checked, and I'll demonstrate exactly how that looks in just a moment. So we're going to say, we don't want to say user cannot change password. And we don't want to say password never expires because we want the user to change their password, from time to time. And if we wanted to, we could say account is disabled. A lot of times when you create an account ahead of time, it's a good security practice to disable the account until they arrive. But I'm not going to do that because I'm going to use the account right after I log into it. So I'm going to click next, and it's going to say, when you click finish, the object will be created. So let's click finish. So now here's our Paul W. Hill user account, or paul.hill user account, and it's been created under instructor Paul. So what we need to do generally after we create a user account, the second thing you're going to do is you're going to add them to the appropriate groups. So if I left click or double click, I can either right click and choose properties, or I can just double click on the user and it'll pop open this properties dialog box. So we can input things like the description, the office, or telephone number, email address. These are all good things to populate for Active Directory. If you have custom profile paths, you can enter that here. By default, I doubt you guys will have this, but some of you will be using roaming profiles. If you're using roaming profiles, this is the place where you put in the profile path and if they have logon scripts. So you can put in telephone numbers, things like that. But the most important thing, if you're not using, besides roaming profiles, which you would enter here, and just a quick rundown on roaming profiles, that is when you store people's profiles on a network share. So it might look like something like this. Let me see here. I didn't mean to close that out. If I go to profile, it might be // server01 / roaming profiles. I'm just making this up / and then you would do %username %. And then if we clicked apply, we can see that it would be this remote server. And what that would do is it would relocate their desktop to the remote server. And that would allow them to log into multiple servers and still have the same desktop. Okay, that might be a little complicated. It's a little bit out of the scope of what we're teaching, but I just wanted to show you that. So mainly you're going to want to go to the member of tab, and you're going to need to add them to groups because likely your enterprise will have different groups that they need to be added to. Like they might have a web developers group, or a security team group. And these groups will have special permissions that will grant them, access to certain folders or certain files on the domain. So let's assume that Paul W. Hill is going to be a domain administrator. So right now, if we go to member of, we can see that he's a member of the domain users group. This is the default group for all users that come into the domain. So if I click the add button here and I type in domain admins and I click check names, we can see that it found the group domain admin. So now I can click OK, and now that user is a member of the domain admins group. Now I could easily remove them from the group if I made a mistake by just selecting the group and then clicking remove here. We can also set a primary group, but there's no, like it tells you right here, there's no need to change the primary group unless you have Mac clients that have certain compliancy requirements that you set a primary group for the user. We don't, we're working in a Windows domain. Most of you will be working with only Windows computers. So we're just going to click apply and we're going to click OK. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out of my current user account, which I think I'm in the administrator account, and I'm going to log in with that new account we just created. So I'm going to hit Control-Alt-Delete, and I'm going to select other user here in the bottom, and we're going to type in paul.hill, and we'll type in that temporary password that I just created. Now I'm going to press enter, and it says, remember we checked that checkbox, user must change password? Since we checked that checkbox, we're getting this message saying the user's password must be changed before signing in. We'll click OK, and now we're creating our new password, which I'm going to do right now. Okay, so now they're not using a password that is as insecure as your temporary password, because if you're handing out to a lot of people and a new user is getting hired, it would be easy for someone to figure out, hey, I know they're using first.last. They're hiring John Smith, so I'm going to log in as John Smith using that temporary password that the administrator gave me when he created my account. So it's a good security practice for one, require them to change their password, and two, don't use the same temporary password for every user in your domain. So now I'm going to click the go button, and it's going to change the user account, and it's going to log me in. Okay, well, it didn't log me in. I need to click sign in again, and it's preparing Windows. All right, so now it's going to log in and load my desktop. Okay, so that's a little demo of creating a user account and logging in with it. So what if you need to delete account? Well, it's simple. You just right click and choose delete. But before we do that, I want to show you how to reset user passwords. So we've covered how to create a user account, how to add them to a group. Now let's learn how to reset passwords. So let's say you're on a help desk. If you're a sysadmin, you're working with Active Directory, one of your job roles, I can guarantee you, will be to reset user passwords. So you might answer phones, you might get emails, you might have a ticketing system where people submit a ticket and say, hey, my account's locked out, I can't remember my password. Well, this is how you do it. So you answer the phone, they'll say, hey, I'm locked out of my account. So what you're gonna do is open Active Directory and you're gonna click the search button here in the top. It says find objects. Let me close this so you can see this. It says find objects in Active Directory domain services. So right away, what you're going to want to ask them on the phone is say, hey, what's your first and last name? So they'll say Paul Hill. Okay, and then we're just going to click find now. And you can see under this find, we're searching for users, contacts, and groups. And under the N, that's important. If you're working in an environment that has multiple domains, like instructorpaul.com, instructorrobert.com, you might need to just choose entire directory. Now, I clicked find now, and we can see that it returned 2 results. And sometimes this happens where you have a person who has the same first name and the same last name. So you could ask, what's your middle initial? But assume that none of these accounts have a middle initial, because 9 times out of 10, people don't create accounts. So if I rename this, just so you can get a good idea, this is what it will look like. Hit OK, hit find now. So a lot of times you'll end up with 2 Paul Hills or 2 John Smiths. Paul Hill's not too common, but if you have a Chris, something like that, you might end up with more than one account. So the way you figure it out is you would say, hey, so what's your user account? And you'll open this up and they might say paul.hill. So if we open up this second one here and we click account, we can see this username's phill. So we know that this is not the correct one. If we check this first one and go to account, we can see that it's paul.hill, and this is the account that they're trying to log into and they need the password to be reset. So you can ask them, like, is your account locked out? If they just want the account unlocked and they don't want to reset the password, sometimes they say, hey, I fat fingered it. I typed in the password wrong 3 times, but I know what it is. Can you just unlock my account? What you're going to do is click this checkbox and click apply and click OK and say, hey, I unlocked your account. You're good to go. And they'll be able to log in. If they need their password reset, you can right click on the account after you've made sure you've got the right account, because there's nothing worse than resetting a password for the wrong account, because you don't help the person you're on the phone with get logged in, and you end up messing up someone else's account where they can't log in. So you create double the work. So what you do is right click and choose reset password. Now, again, if you want to issue them a temporary password, you can say user must change password at next logon. That is a really good thing to do because, you're giving out a temporary password just like we talked about before. You don't want them to just use that temporary password. So you can type in the new password for them. And I'm going to do that now. User must change password at next logon and unlock the user account. If it's locked out, you'll want to check this checkbox. So this will reset their password and unlock their account. So if you click OK, it says the password for Paul Hill has been changed. So you can either tell it to them over the phone, you can send it to them in an email or in the ticket, but it's generally better to tell them over the phone what the temporary password is, or just go to them in person if possible and log in with their temporary password and then have them change the password. It depends on what the security practices are for your workplace. Okay. So that's how you reset user passwords. That is like one of the number one things you're going to be doing with Active Directory. People forget their password all the time, and it's kind of annoying, but it's an easy thing to fix, and it keeps you employed. So people can't log in, then they can't do their job. So let's learn about deleting the account. It's pretty simple. Just right click on the user account and choose delete. And it'll say, are you sure you want to delete the user named Paul W. Hill? I'm going to say yes. And it says, cannot delete Paul W. Hill because the account's not found. And that's because we renamed it. So we need to hit F5, and now we have Paul Hill. So if I right click on this and choose delete and say yes, it'll say, do you want to delete the user? And it deleted it. And I'm sorry, I have advanced features on by default. So we had a lot of extra stuff in there that you didn't need to see. Okay. So now we've talked about how to create users, how to reset their passwords, how to delete them, how to add them from groups. Now, let's just take a moment and learn about how to create user groups. Every once in a while, you'll need to do this. So we're going to right click on the root of the domain, and I'm going to say new group. And we'll call this group A. Okay, there we go. And we'll click OK. Now, under the scope, we have domain local, global, and universal. Domain local is the most restrictive group, where this group will only be accessible within our domain. Global allows it to be accessible within domains in our forest, and universal makes it accessible to the whole forest. All right, so under group type, we have security and distribution. If you have an Exchange server and you want to make an email list, something like help desk technicians, you want them to be email helpdesk at instructorpaul.com, you would make this a distribution group. If you want to do this for security practices like restricting access to certain files or granting access to certain files, just giving certain permissions to certain users, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be using a security group. So I'll click OK. And now let's talk about where we locate these user groups. So you generally don't want to create them under instructorpaul.com like I've been doing. You'll want to put them under an organizational unit. So I have this one created called Instructor Paul. This was not created by default. Generally, you have an organizational unit that matches your domain name. That's not always the case, but let's expand it out here and we can see we have domain users. So let's move this group in under Instructor Paul. Let me show you. There's 2 ways to do this. You can just drag it over to Instructor Paul, or you can right click and say move. A lot of times just moving it with the move method by right clicking and choosing move is a safer way to do it, because what you're doing is you're doing Instructor Paul, you select this and then you make sure you have the right selection, you click OK. Whereas if you're dragging it, it's easy to pick the wrong group. And if you do that, it can actually have a pretty bad impact on your domain. It can break things, in fact. So if we right click and choose move, we can just choose Instructor Paul and click OK. So now if we go to Instructor Paul, we can see group A has been created here. But wouldn't it be better if we're going to have a bunch of groups, it'd be kind of nice to have another organizational unit called groups, So let's go ahead and do that. So let's right click on Instructor Paul and let's choose new and let's say organizational unit. And let's just call this groups. And we could call it domain groups if we wanted to, just for the fun of it. And we have this checkbox that says protect container from accidental deletion. We'll leave that checked and we'll click OK. And now we can either drag it into groups or we can right click, choose move, and go under Instructor Paul and domain groups and click OK. So now under domain groups, we have group A. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So if we right click on this, we can choose properties or we can double left click on it and we can see what kind of members we have of this group. Now, right now, this isn't a member of any group and it doesn't have any members. So a group can be a member of another group and it can have members. So that gets kind of complicated, but let me just show you how to add members. So if we click on the members tab and then we click add, we can type in Paul Hill or whatever user we want to add to the group. We say check names and we can click OK. And now if we click apply, what we can do is we can go to our domain users and let me find Paul Hill. If I open up Paul Hill, we can click member of, and we can see he's a member of group A. All right, see how that works? So if we go to domain groups, we can also add group A as a member of another group. So if we click member of and we look down here, we say this list displays only groups from the current domain and groups maintained in the global catalog. So that's pretty self-explanatory. It's only going to show groups in this list that are under instructorpaul.com or in the global catalog. So we're going to click add and we're going to find another group and we'll just do domain administrators, which is not a group that you want to just hand out to everybody. So if we do domain admin and click check names, we can see that it finds the name and we'll click OK. And we'll click apply. What this means, essentially, any user added to group A is also going to be in, or it's going to have the rights of the domain administrators group. So you need to be very careful with how you're nesting these groups. So if we go to, I think it is built in, and let's look for domain admins. Let's see. It's not under, maybe it's under users. It's under users. Okay, let's see. Where is it? Okay, domain admins is listed right here. If we double click on this group and we see members, we can see that group A is a member. Now I'm going to remove that and I'm going to say yes and click apply and okay. Because domain admins is like it's like the ultimate God rights of your domain. If someone has the domain admin rights, they can do anything in your domain. And if they have malicious intentions or if they just don't know what they're doing, man, they can mess up a lot. So you got to be really careful when you're handing out these user memberships. So domain admins, that's very risky. Same with enterprise admins, it's risky. So a lot of people like to create, restricted groups or their own groups, and then they go in with group policy and they create group policy objects that restrict the admin rights, and things like that. You have things like DNS admins that are kind of created for you. But, it's better for you to create your own groups and go in group policy and kind of restrict their permissions down. Now, I'm not going to be covering that in this video because that's pretty advanced. It's beyond the scope of what I'm talking about right now. So that is how you create a user group. Now let's talk about, we talked about creating organizational units. Let's talk about deleting them because it's not as straightforward as you'd expect. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose delete to delete group A. I'm going to say yes. And let's go back to Instructor Paul and let's right click on domain groups and let's say delete because we don't want this organizational unit. I'm going to say yes. And we're going to get this error saying you don't have sufficient privileges to delete the domain groups or this object is protected from accidental deletion. Now I'm logged in as the domain administrator user, which means I know I have permissions and I have privileges. So it's got to be the second one. It's protected from accidental deletion. So let's click OK. And if you remember when we created the new organizational unit, I'll show you by creating another one. This checkbox right here says protect container from accidental deletion. We left that checkbox checked, and that's a good thing to do because you don't want to the worst thing is, man, if you delete something in Active Directory, there is no undo. So you're pretty much kind of in trouble. So what you have to do if you want to delete an OU that has protection is click View, Advanced Features. And now we have all this extra stuff, and it almost looks like we're looking at an entirely new view, but we're not. We still have the built-in domain controllers. We still have the Instructor Paul organizational unit here. So if we open this, we can find domain groups. Right-click on this OU and choose Properties. And we're going to go to the Object tab, and right here is the checkbox. Protect object from accidental deletion. You couldn't see this under the regular view. You can only see this under advanced view. Another nice thing under the advanced view, under the object tab, is you can see the exact location of the object. So it's under the instructorpaul.com domain, the Instructor Paul organizational unit, and there it is, domain group. So if we have to find an object in Active Directory, you can turn on that advanced features and view it under the object tab. So now that I've checked this checkbox, it says protect object from accidental deletion. I'm going to click apply. We'll click OK. And now we will right click. Actually, let's turn off advanced features just to make things less complicated. Let's go back to Instructor Paul, right click on domain groups, and we'll choose delete, say yes, and it has been deleted. Now, just as a demonstration, if I go into properties of domain users, we can't see that object tab. So it's only visible if you enable advanced features. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is how do you set up file shares? Because this is something that you need to do every once in a while. It's not that common. Well, you can right click, choose new, and we're going to say shared folder. And we need to type in the name of the shared folder, test, let's call it test, and then the path of the folder. So I'm going to have to create one really fast because I don't think I have one that's set up. So I'm going to go into the C drive and we're going to call this shared folder, or we'll just call it share. Let's call it share. Okay. And we'll right click on this folder and we'll choose properties and we'll go to sharing and we're going to say share here on the middle here. And then we're going to say, who do we want to share it with? Let's say domain users. And this, we're searching for groups. We could type in a particular user. If you look here, we have the administrator user, and then we have the administrators group. So if we type in domain users and we click add, all the domain users will be able to read this. Now, if we want them to be able to add files, we can say read and write, and we'll click share. Now, this is where you create web developers will have their own shared group or their own folder. Sales will have their own group and their own folder, and we would share it with them. I'm not going to show you how to do all that. I'm just going to show you how to create the share. So let's go ahead and type in the path of this share. So if we go to // since we created that share, and we go to, I think it is IPDC01 / and press enter, we can see the share file is here. So if we open this folder, we can click up here in the address bar and copy the share, and we'll paste in the network path. Okay, so now we'll click OK, and now we have the shared folder published to our Active Directory domain. Okay, so now that this is published to our Active Directory domain, we could map this automatically with things like group policy. So we could say, I want to map the test drive to the Z drive, within group policy for all these users. And that means when the user logs in, by default, they will have this test shared folder mapped by default to their computer on their Z drive or D drive or whatever you decide to map it to. All right. Now, the same thing goes for printers. You can right click and choose new printer, and we can type in a name, test printer. I don't have the object here, but you would type in the actual path to the printer, not just test printer. So if I had a printer mapped to this domain controller, I could share it with the whole domain by typing in the path to it. So it'd be like IPDC01. Let me see if I can spell this right. IPDC01, and then it'd be, printer 01. If that was what I called it when I connected it. But it'd have to physically be connected to IPDC01. And I don't have a printer connected to this service. This is a virtual machine. So if I click OK, it's going to say an error, couldn't find it. And I don't know how long this is going to take. So hopefully it doesn't take too long. Oh, if I press escape, it cancels out of it. So that you can create printers in the same way that are published to the Active Directory domain. So when people want to find a printer, like if I wanted to add a printer here, let me type in add printer. I'm not sure if that's going to find results now. It's not. So I'm going to click settings. Here we go. If I click settings and I go to, where is it hiding? Printers. Oh, devices. There it is. So if I click on devices and then I click add a printer or scanner, it's going to be scanning, searching for printers or scanners. This is where it would find it because it's been published to Active Directory. It would pop up in this list right here. Okay, so that can be useful for your domain is to publish things like shared folders and shared printers to your domain. Okay, so that is your crash course on Active Directory users and computers. Remember, creating user accounts, resetting passwords, managing groups, that is going to be the things you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis with Active Directory. So I hope this video was helpful to you. If you're still watching, man, please send me a like, please subscribe, please drop a comment below. Tell me what you thought of the video. If there's anything I didn't cover and I should have covered, then let me know because I'm always trying to make better videos. I'm always trying to improve my training. I create training for you guys, not full-time, but part-time in the afternoons after I get home from work. And I like improving. I like doing a better job. So just let me know what you guys think. And again, if you want to create a lab and you want to get more hands-on experience that you can add to your own resume, make sure you click that link in the description. Head over to this website, enter your name and your password, and I will send you that ebook and you can get started with your IT experience. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and comment, and I will see you in the next video.